Welcome back, my friends. It's so wonderful to see you here again. Last time we left off with James following Uncle home as the evening settled over Thuong Lam Lake, the big catch loaded up, and a goby waiting to be cooked by Uncle's wife. This continues my own take on these characters and the lives they might be living. So, do you remember that invitation? The one that surprised even James? Well, he said yes. He's walking up the path to Uncle's little house right now, his arms still aching from the day's work, his heart full of something he can't quite name. The house is small but warm. A tin roof, a wooden porch, smoke curling up from a clay stove out back. And there, in the doorway, stands Uncle's wife, Auntie, a small woman with silver hair and the kindest eyes James has ever seen. "So this is the young man," she says, wiping her hands on her apron. "My husband called from the shore. He told me you caught the goby yourself." James smiles, a little shy. "I did, Auntie, but Uncle taught me everything." She laughs softly and waves him inside. "Come, sit. You worked hard today. You eat with us tonight." And here's what happens. James steps into their home, and he sees their whole life in one room. A faded photograph on the wall, a small shrine with incense, a worn wooden table set for 3, now being set for 4. It's humble. It's modest, but it is full of love. What I find beautiful about this is so simple. Uncle and Auntie don't have much, but they open their door without hesitation. They share their table with a stranger as if he were their own son. That kind of generosity doesn't come from the wallet. It comes from the heart. Auntie takes the goby and begins to clean it at the stove. The fish James caught with his own 2 hands. And as the oil starts to sizzle, the whole house fills with a smell so good it makes James's stomach ache. "Sit, sit," Uncle says, pulling out a stool. "Today we eat like kings." But here's what surprised me. As they settled at the table, James noticed something. There was an empty chair in the corner. A child's small wooden stool, kept clean, kept ready, though no child sat there. And he saw the way Auntie's eyes drifted toward it just for a moment. James didn't ask. Not yet. But he felt it. There was a story in this house, a tender one. And somehow he knew that before this evening was over, he would come to understand it. So they sat down together. And the meal began. Let's go back to that table, where 4 people sat down to share 1 fish and a whole lot of warmth. The food was simple. The goby, fried golden. A bowl of rice. Some boiled greens from the garden. But James later said it was one of the best meals of his life. Not because of the food, because of who he shared it with. "Eat, eat," Auntie kept saying, piling more onto his bowl. "You're too thin. A young man should eat." James laughed. "Auntie, you sound just like my own mother." And at that, something flickered across Auntie's face. A softness, a small ache. She glanced at Uncle, and he gave her a gentle nod as if to say, "Go ahead, tell him." So she did. She told James about their life on the old land, before the dam, about the village that now sleeps beneath the water, about the home where she and Uncle raised their family, the home that the rising lake took from them 30 years ago. "We lost the land," she said quietly, "but we kept each other." And that was enough. James listened, his bowl forgotten. "It must have been so hard," he said, "starting over with nothing." Uncle nodded slowly. "Hard, yes, but the lake that took our home also feeds us now. Life is strange that way. It takes with one hand and gives with the other." What I love about this moment is how these 2 old souls hold no bitterness. They lost their village, their land, their entire past. And yet, they speak of the lake not as an enemy, but as a difficult old friend. That is wisdom, my friends. the kind you only earn after a lifetime. Then Auntie's gaze drifted again to that small wooden stool in the corner. And this time, James gently followed her eyes. "Auntie," he said softly, "whose stool is that?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, a tender, faraway smile. "Our son," she said. "He used to sit there when he was a little boy. He's grown now. He left for the city years ago to find work. We haven't seen him in a long, long time." The room went still. James felt his chest tighten. He understood now. The empty chair, the careful way they kept it clean. This was a home that loved deeply and waited patiently. And then something quiet and beautiful passed between them. Uncle reached over and patted James on the shoulder, the same way he had on the boat. "Today," he said, "the lake sent us a young man to share our table. Maybe that is its way of saying we are not so alone after all." James felt his eyes sting, because he realized in that moment he wasn't just a guest. For one evening, he was filling a chair that had sat empty far too long, and what came next would touch his heart even deeper. After dinner, they moved to the porch. The night was cool, the lake shimmering silver under the moon. Uncle lit a small lamp, and the three of them sat together in the gentle quiet. James couldn't stop thinking about their son, about the empty stool, about two old people who had given him so much and asked for nothing in return. "Uncle," he said carefully, "your son? Do you ever hear from him?" Uncle was quiet. He looked out at the water for a long time. "Sometimes," he said, "a phone call once or twice a year. He works so hard in the city. He sends a little money when he can, but the distance..." He trailed off. "The distance is heavy on an old heart." Auntie reached over and held her husband's hand. And James, watching these two people who loved their faraway child so dearly, felt something rise up in him. A decision. "Uncle, Auntie," he said, "may I do something? I'd like to record a little video of the two of you. Of today. The fishing, the big catch, this meal. And maybe you could say a few words to your son. I could send it to him." The old couple looked at each other, stunned. "You would do that?" Auntie whispered. "Of course," James said. "Your son should see how strong his father still is, how beautiful your home is. He should hear your voices." And so, right there on the porch under the moon, with the lamp glowing soft and gold, Uncle and Auntie sat close together, and they spoke to the camera. They spoke to their son. "My boy," Uncle said, his voice trembling. "Today a kind young man helped me bring in the biggest catch in years. We are well. We are healthy. Your mother and I think of you every single day. Come home when you can. Your stool is still here, waiting." Auntie couldn't speak. She just smiled and wiped her tears. James lowered the camera, his own eyes wet. He had come to this lake to catch fish. He was leaving with something far greater. Here's the part that moves me most. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give isn't money or fish or anything we can hold. Sometimes it's simply helping two hearts reach across a distance. James didn't have much, but he had a way to carry their love to their son. And that, my friends, is everything. That night, James promised Uncle and Auntie he would return. And he made another quiet promise to himself, one he hadn't told them yet. A promise about that faraway son, and a reunion he was beginning to dream of. And what I believe comes next will be the most beautiful moment of all.